So if we continue to remain in this state of separation, the possibility for solving our problems are somewhere between slim and none. Obviously, there's a change in consciousness that needs to occur, and the good news is it is occurring. And that is that we're beginning to move out of separation and into unity. So when you speak of unity consciousness, what you're now speaking of is the fact that no matter how good nor how bad it might seem, there's only one spirit. There's only one spirit moving through all life on all the different levels. And, a little easier to see when a good event is happening, that it's a function of the one spirit. Not quite so easy to see when it's a function of the dark side. But if we can step out of separation long enough to notice that it's not what it appears to be, the whole thing is being orchestrated from a much higher level, and in that setting, the dark and the light are actually working together, serving as timing agents. So when your stuff gets stirred up in the context of unity, that's not a bad thing. That's a healing in process. And you get the healing by learning to align with, by learning to harmonize on an energetic basis rather than resist what's going on. And the end result of that is called integration. Transmutation, translation, transformation are other names for it too. And this is where we're headed. So instead of resisting the stirring up, if you will, we need to learn to align with it and realize that there's something else going on here. The darkness needs to be stirred up in order for the possibility of the greater possibility to come in, and that's the light of the higher dimensional worlds. Does that help a little bit, make a little bit of sense?
It does, and I've always been interested of asking, as you said before as well, why now? Maybe we can talk about the mechanics of this a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, good. That's real good. In order to do that, we need to take a look at one of the motions that the Earth makes. Obviously, we know that Mother Earth is tilted on her axis about 23.5 degrees, gives us our 4 seasons. But not as well known is the fact that the axis itself is in a wobble. It's a very slight wobble. It only changes 1 degree every 72 years. Every 2,160 years, it changes the viewpoint of one constellation. And every 25,920 years, approximately, let's just say 26,000 years, it makes one complete cycle. And it traces an elliptical pattern if you could see it. If you could just look at the night sky from the North Pole for 26,000 years, we had nothing better to do than to do that, you would see this elliptical pattern. So it's this 26,000 year cycle that really, when you understand it, explains a lot in terms at least of answering the question, why now? It's called the precession of the equinoxes. And it's been studied for a long, long time. Mainly the Hindus and the Tibetans in ancient times were very interested in this. And what they noticed, well, a couple things. One is that we're moving in a counterclockwise direction. And at one point in this cycle, we are closest to the center of the galaxy. At the other point, obviously, we're furthest away. That when we turn the corner and start moving away from the center of the galaxy, and what they've noticed is that when we get about 900 years away from the center of the galaxy, that we just go to sleep. I mean, we are in the dark or in the asleep cycle for 13,000 years as we're turning away from the center. And then what they've also noticed is that about 900 years removed from the furthest point from the center of the galaxy, we start waking up. Well, all this talk about December 21st, 2012, what it means is that that's the exact moment when we hit the bubble, if you will, 900 years removed, 13,000 years removed from going to sleep, and we start to wake up. But not just start to wake up, I mean, we're waking up fast, dramatically so.
So, sorry to interrupt, but the changes that we are going through and these cycles of our rise and fall, if you will, to put it in a simple term, is completely driven by our position and angle in the galaxy.
Boy, it sure explains a lot. It seems to be so that this 26,000-year cycle basically is, it determines a lot. So when you hit one of these 2 points, 13,000 years apart, there is a shift in consciousness. Obviously, if you go to the asleep state, we're going to fall a bit in consciousness. But then when we hit the awake state, we're going to grow in consciousness, and that's exactly what we're doing. Now, there's more, and that is that obviously that's a time of tremendous change with regard to consciousness, but it's also a time of tremendous change with regard to the physical nature of things, the ultimate expression of which is nothing less than the poles shifting. So we're right at that time right now where these major events are going to occur and are occurring.
Pole shift, magnetic, a physical pole flip. Which one are we talking about here?
Both.
Both at the same time, huh?
Yeah. Well, not necessarily at the same time, but very closely timed together. They can happen at the same time. But what usually happens first is the magnetic pole shift. And if you've noticed anything about the Earth's magnetic field, it's been going down dramatically.
That's right. It's racing towards Russia. There's a lot of reports about weird magnetic anomalies the last few years here, actually.
Yep, there sure have been, and the adventure continues. So if you take a look at the magnetic anomalies, you can go back, maybe 30 years or so, and you can begin to see that the migratory patterns of birds began to be significantly disrupted. You know, they thought that they were following the migratory, the magnetic fields, but they would find themselves in strange new places. And same is true for trying to land airplanes, and magnetic maps had to be changed. This is big time stuff.
We've had, and I don't know the mechanics of why this would occur during the New Year's. I know that the celebration is obviously tied to a celestial event. This is why humanity has placed the New Year's on this particular day. But around the New Year's now for the last 2, maybe even 3 years, we've had very many strange things happening about birds falling out of the sky, fish stranding. We have, whales and other sea creatures kind of beaching themselves. Weird things like this.
Yep.
Do you think it's connected to the magnetics changing, basically?
Certainly the whales beaching themselves is. The birds falling out of the sky, I don't know about that. I'd be a little bit suspicious that HAARP might have something to do with that.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's always that. Yeah, there's always that.
Don't really want to go there with HAARP, though.
Well, it's another factor that is interesting in all this, of course, but we will hold off on that for now then, Bob. What I want to ask you how you think that this will then affect people. If we look at it from the point of view of what's happening to some of the animals, it seems obviously not too positive from our point of view. Will this affect people differently depending on where we are individually, maybe in our lives? What do you think? What do you make of it?
Yeah, everybody's going to be and is being affected by it. Before I talk about that, Henrik, though, let me just say something here. This discussion could easily bring up some fear in people, but I don't want to do that because there's something else going on here. And I don't really think that we're going to have a violent shifting of the poles this time like history tells us we have in the past. And what I mean by that is that if you do any of the research on pole shifting, you begin to quickly discover that since you're looking at surface winds of about 1,000 miles an hour and entire continents moving up and down, that, that's a rather major event. But I don't think it's going to play out that way this time. I think that we are in the midst, right literally in the middle of the most unique ride from one-dimensional world to another that life has ever seen. So I just would like to help us and everyone listening to just relax a little bit, and maybe we can, see this as a smooth ride.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
and why is that, do you think, then? How is this different this time?
Boy, that is a huge, huge question, and it's going to take some time to get there. Maybe we can just slowly work our way in that direction.
Sure.
But I forgot the question you asked me. Do you remember what it was?
Well, we were talking basically about why or how this will affect people, if it will affect them differently, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah, our emotional stability is tied directly to the stability of the Earth's magnetic field. Now, look at the phenomenon of the full moon. And if you look at if you go to any police blotter and take a look at the increased crime rate of the day before, the day of, and the day after the full moon, you'll get a sense of what I mean. And I've talked to people in law enforcement. A few have come and taken my workshops, and they have confirmed what I'm just saying here, that absolutely that is true. And but what we're talking about here with the Earth's magnetic field doing what it's doing, it's more like a full moon becoming bigger and brighter, not just, one day, one evening a month, but almost like every night. So people are being affected emotionally. You can pretty much ask anybody, is it more difficult for you to keep things together emotionally now than it was maybe 5, 10, or 20 years ago? And you get pretty general agreement on that. I mean, there's other factors that might come into play if you've been, if you've lost your job or your home, or
for sure.
Factors like that too. But still, the magnetic field is a major factor in all of this. I would submit.
Would you say, Bob, though, that as you say, obviously the economic situation, this is a big factor to all of this. But how about the point of view that these changes that we're seeing in society, the greater cycles, if you will, that we experience in society, are also driven by an underlying factor, which might be, well, to the society at large in a way, we're largely unconscious of it, correct?
Everything is tied together here. Usually when you reach this point in the procession, things start to break down. Now, you could make a pretty good case for the fact that things are breaking down, economically and just about any way that you want to look. Wars going on all over the place. You could make the case for the fact that things are breaking down. But I don't want to get too carried away with that, again, because there is something else going on here. The breaking down aspect of things, first of all, is nothing compared to what it could be. The other side of that is we're keeping things together relatively well compared to what it could be. But here again, I just want to emphasize that in the larger picture here, this breaking down is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
In other words, there's an old world that is dying and a new world that simultaneously is being born. Yes, things are getting stirred up, but here again, everything is a function of consciousness. And we need to learn that it's time for us to start stepping out of the separation thing and into the larger pictures, and that's the interconnection that we have to all life everywhere. And so in that context, then you begin to see this cycle in completely different ways. In other words, instead of it being a bad or a dangerous thing, it is the necessary healing in process. And yes, it is affecting us all. But the you might say plus side of this is that when you learn to catch the ride, in other words, when you learn to harmonize with the increased energetic aspect of things rather than to resist it, then you realize that you have the power and the ability to integrate or to transmute those very things that you've been putting up with or trying to change in some way, fighting or resisting, and it now becomes, it now becomes your ally in this process. So this is a healing that we are all in process of learning to align with.
I've always been interested in the question if everyone is both intended and can and will go through certain set of changes and to say improvements might be the wrong word here, but basically what I'm trying to get to is when I look around